Istoricul și jurnalistul politic polonez Adam Michnik scria despre totalitarism că acesta nu are chip uman, ci doar unul cu dinții sfărâmați. Fascismul, stalinismul, comunismul și orice alt regim totalitar nu fac altceva decât să anihileze omul și drepturile sale inalienabile. Structural, regimurile totalitare au toate aceleași linii directoare: cultul omului nou, obsesia pentru ideologii și supremația unui partid unic, elogierea frenetică a liderului suprem și aparatul de propagandă infiltrat în toate straturile unei societăți. Istoria secolului 20 ne-a demonstrat, cu un bilanț dramatic, faptul că anihilarea libertății de gândire este doar o primă treaptă a totalitarismului, pentru că, dincolo de ea, ororile produse de nazism, fascism, stalinism și comunism înseamnă, de fapt, în cifre, moartea a zeci de milioane de oameni, în lagăre, în gulaguri și în închisori. Mantra totalitarismului a fost mereu crearea unei noi ordini în societate, promisiunea unei dreptăți pentru popoare, promisiuni care nu au fost altceva decât instrumente perfide ale regimurilor opresive dictatoriale. În 2024, dezbaterea despre totalitarism am fi crezut-o doar partea unei lecții despre trecut, despre tragediile din istorie, însă politica lumii readuce în dezbatere noțiuni precum formațiunile de extremă dreaptă sau extremă stângă. Toate acestea, crede istoricul și autorul britanic Simon Sebag Montefiore, au explicații dacă știm să citim cu atenție nu doar istoria recentă, ci întreaga istorie a omenirii. Pe celebrul autor l-am întâlnit la București, la lansarea celui mai recent volum semnat de acesta.
Well, it's a time when history has never been more important. And in a way, history's never been more powerful. So it's important to read it. It's not just an entertainment, though it is that, but it also contains lessons and warnings. Unfortunately, none of these lessons and warnings are simple as one would like. And so, which is why history has become such a battleground, especially on the internet. But there's another angle of it. I think because of the decline of religion in European and Western countries, instead, in place of religion, politicians now use history as a sort of justification, because history has a strange legitimacy, authenticity, a strange prestige that can be used, and that means that for we historians, we have a special responsibility to try and make sure, try and be the custodians of balanced history.
Lumea, o istorie de familie, este de fapt un parcurs al evoluției umane din preistorie până în prezent. Este o istorie a lumii la scara cea mai grandioasă, dar și la scara intimă a familiilor care au guvernat lumea. Războaie, religie, migrație, pandemii, regimuri politice, toate se regăsesc în volumul semnat de Montefiore.
You said, and it's a quote, I tried to think of a way to put the human back into a world history.
Well, this book, all humanity is here, but yes, it's really about politics and power. So it couldn't be more relevant to what is happening in the world today, in the Middle East, in Russia, Ukraine, and of course in our democracies, in the United States with Donald Trump, and here in Romania, where you are on the verge of a dangerous moment, where you are living on the edge of a volcano today. So, and of course there's a lot of Romanian history in here, but yes, the idea of it is simple. It's a world history, all peoples, all nations, all continents, all eras, all religions, from the Stone Age to the Drone Age, and it's told in one narrative through the focus on families. And families can mean a lot of things. Some of them are royal families, some of them are self-made families, some of them are enslaved, some of them come from nothing. And so there are all sorts of, some of them are business families, tycoon families, and I guess the Spectator magazine in England said it was like Succession meets Game of Thrones. But it's much more than that, because really it's a study about how political power works. And I hope that every page has something entertaining or fascinating. I should say it's very long, but you don't have to read it all the way through. You can start anyway. You can start in the middle if you like. But this is what you need to know to understand the world today. And it ends with a conclusion that has many warnings and predictions for what is happening right now.
Actually, what is happening right now is all in here, because history repeating is like a mantra of this world. Why do we still keep on doing the same mistakes? Why do we keep on turning back to totalitarianism? Why?
Well, they're not. The reason is because if the repetitions were precise, we would understand them, but they never are. And history is neither cyclical nor quite repetitive, but more like spasmodic. And history happens in sort of sudden rushes of panic, of fear, of lust for power. And so if we look in history for simple lessons, we don't find them. Not put as simply as we would like. And that is the challenge now, to see through the history, to see the underlying warnings. And there are many warnings about a return to totalitarianism. But this only happens when democracies are themselves consuming themselves from within. And that is the challenge, is how to save democracy, is not just to defeat people who are clearly intent on destroying our democracies and our civil societies, but also looking at our democracies and realistically and understanding why they are in crisis. And often that is to do with the type of people who are being selected to succeed in democracies, the type of people who become leaders in democracies have become a class of person who are very similar all across the EU, for example, in Britain, in America. And those people, the very people who succeed in this particular system with this particular skill set, are the very people who are incapable of changing anything when they're in power. And that is a fundamental crisis of democracy, which has to be solved somehow. Partly, we need to recognize that this system, the selection of these kind of elite bureaucrat class, has become self-defeating. And the phenomenon where you often have two rival parties alternating in power, but essentially colluding in the same policies and the same and keeping the same secrets and not discussing the same subjects, is beginning to prove disastrous. The big thing they don't discuss is migration, but there are other things too. Defense, for example, and what you need to spend on defense. And there are other things. And another thing is, the reality that we are involved in a battle of systems in foreign policy between autocracies, totalitarian states. I call them the closed societies, who are opposed to the open societies. And we need some realistic analysis of what is actually happening. And we need to have the confidence to back the people who back our view of the world and our system against the hostile systems. And that also isn't happening. So there are a lot of things you can point to in which the democracies are not at the moment, they're not delivering on their promises.
In the propaganda, we talk about poverty, we talk about religion. These are instruments for the propaganda to use people to vote in a certain way.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking right now, first they fascinate the fools, then they muzzle the intelligent.
I mean, there's an inbuilt, the inbuilt necessity, the basic necessity for all free societies to function is trust. And anything that undermines trust is very dangerous for us. And that's the whole danger of the new internet and the social media, which we can discuss in a minute. But the things that you're mentioning, poverty, these are reflected in the viewpoint of people that they're being ignored, that their interests are being ignored, that other people are making money while they're not making money and they're losing money. And the fear of poverty. And the fear of poverty is always joined with the fear of powerlessness. And these are the things that are exploited by populists, demagogues. And, but in many cases, they reflect the problems that we started talking about. The fact that they're no longer able to reach the elites who are running these countries and who are filled with their own self-righteousness, not realizing that they are not really reflecting the people they're meant to be serving. And of course, part of this is reflected in London or Bucharest. Everyone you meet in my world in London, or probably the world of your world in Bucharest, agree with us and and believe that we're absolutely right, and it's self-evident that it's right. We don't even need to persuade people because it's obviously right. Only stupid people would believe otherwise. But then you go outside Bucharest, into the countryside, into the small towns, and it's the same in America, it's the same in Britain. You go outside and you find people who believe something completely different. And they also believe it's self-evident. And much of what they believe is based on falsehoods and misinformation, but not all of it. They're right about a lot of things. And they're right that no one is listening to them and that things are being decided without consulting them. And so this gives a big window to people who arrive and say, I'm listening to you and I will disrupt this world. The challenge is how to disrupt the world without destroying the whole system. And democracies are flexible in that way. A new person can come in and fire everybody and appoint a new government, and that government should be able to deliver radical change without the violence and disorder of revolution. And so in some cases this is what's happening, and in other cases it does indeed destroy the system, as it did in the 1930s, because the democracies are very, very recent and very, very fragile. And, one forgets the history, but in the West we forget the history, but of course you know it very well here in Romania, but, there were dictatorships until 1989, 91. There were dictatorships in Western Europe until 1975, in Spain. And so all of this is very, very recent. One forgets that the American democracy was just a democracy for white people until 1965. So all of our democracies are much more fragile and their benefits are less self-evident than we like to think. So part of what we need to do is look at the systems and introduce a little bit more honesty and openness in the way that actually politics is actually conducted at the center of our democracies. Because actually, when one steps back and steps out of the initial sort of horror and steps away from the tendency to call these views false consciousness, or as Marx would put it, but actually most of the elites just say these are morons who've been misinformed and lied to and have believed it. And actually, it's much more profound than that. And if you're
and they can decide for us.
They can decide because it is a democracy, and their votes are equal. And the fact is that not all the stuff they're saying are lies, and one only has to look at what's happened in America to see that.
the end, I would like you to tell your readers, because you have readers here in Romania, why do they need to read this book?
Dear readers, it's great to be here in Romania, and I love being in Romania. And my Romanian readers are very important to me. And indeed, I would say that Romanian is one of the great languages every writer needs to be published in. But this book is long, but it's also a treasure trove of stories, of amazing characters, of inspiring art and poetry and language. It's a book about love, but it's also about war and peace and pandemics. And it's about, essentially, it's all told through families, the rise and fall of families. But really, it's about us. And it's about how we live now, how we want to live, who we are and where we come from. And this is what you need to know.
Thank you so much, Simon.
Thank you.